and welcome to Ethical Hacking and Penetration Testing, brought to you by Eduonix. This is Chapter 2, Real-World Information Gathering. So some of the things we're going to be covering is information intelligence techniques, footprinting and reconnaissance, organization of information during the test, social media websites, harvesting company emails, using Maltego for information gathering, it's a fantastic tool, search engines for penetration testers, using WhatWeb, HTTP Recon and SSL Scan, IP address geolocation, web app firewall detection, HTTP and DNS load balancer detection, DNS enumeration for pen testers, mail server enumeration, also DNS and a Whois lookup. So we'll start with information intelligence techniques. So these examples here are more kind of government orientated. The collection of intelligence is at the heart of a security service's work. By gathering secret intelligence, you seek to obtain detailed knowledge of a target's organisation, their key personalities, infrastructure, intentions, plans, capabilities, etc. So here we have covert human intelligence sources, which is boots on the ground reporting information back to you. Directed surveillance, following and or observing targets. Interception of communications is snooping on a specific target. And intrusion surveillance, which is eavesdropping on a person in their car, home, anywhere in their kind of personal space. Now, information intelligence techniques here. Network and host mapping. If you consider you need to determine what hosts are available. It allows prioritization of targets. It lets you have more effective attack vectors. If you can pinpoint a weak server before you actually attack it, then you know that you have to go for that particular server. So the goal of host mapping is to simply determine what hosts or services are available in a facility or a company. In some sense, the odds are in the analyst's favour. We have a lot of targets out there. As you can see, if you look at the Class B network, there's quite a few. So if you take that example on the 172.10.0.0, the amount of possible addresses is 65,536. There's also 65,536 TCP ports and the same amount of UDP ports as well. That means that the attacker has in excess of about 23 trillion possible targets. Scanning at a rate of 18 packets a second, it would probably take a shade under 5 million years to complete the scan. But because computers have a lifespan of between 3 and 5 years, the rate of change definitely confounds the usefulness of the scan. So to be sure, attackers are coming up with smarter and faster scanning techniques. There's no longer a need for an attacker to consider all possible port numbers. 50 TCP ports and UDP ports will account for probably all the services running on a computer. So the target space is something in the range of 163 million, which could be scanned in less than 4 months at 18 packets a second, which is definitely achievable, although 4 months is still quite a long time. If the site doesn't have any kind of intrusion detection, the site owners will probably never know if the attacker is random or if the attack is actually aimed at them or not. But if the attackers can get an accurate host map, they can turn the tables on those of us who defend networks as well. Many address spaces are lightly populated. If the attacker is able to determine where the hosts are, they have serious advantages. Say in our Class B network was populated with only about 6,000 computers and the attacker can find them. Now the attacker can scan the populated hosts on the network and at 18 packets a second in less than 10 days, and there are still much more efficient ways to do the scan as well, which we'll cover. If we allow ICMP echo requests broadcasts, they can ping map our network with only 255 packets. The point of the story here is pretty obvious. If the attackers are not able to get intelligence and information about our site, they're forced to do a lot of guesswork and work on a very sparse matrix. If we do let their intelligence gathering probe succeed, then they don't really have to do much guessing at all. So how could an attacker get such accurate host mapping? Many sites still make a host table available for FTP download. Other sites allow DNS zone transfers, or perhaps the attacker will have to work to discover this information without host scans. So this here is an example of an ICMP host scan. If a site doesn't block ICMP echo requests, the attacker can simply ping each address. This tends to be an older approach to mapping. The scan is fairly slow, and the scanner could be scanning multiple addresses, but it's still fast enough that a scan detector ought to catch it. You can see from pinger.mapm.com going to these addresses. If there was a successful ICMP echo request, you would see an ICMP echo reply coming back from the address. And in the trace you can see here the attacker is targeting multiple network addresses. Two were detected by the sensor constellation, but it's probable that there were many more, and by interleaving the scan the attacker has managed to space out the UDP echo requests far enough apart that the probe probably wouldn't be detected by most intrusion detection systems. The scrambled addresses is also quite a good touch. The UDP6 refers to a UDP payload with 6 bytes of data, and as you'll see in further chapters, stealth intrusion detection has a fairly specific meaning, but you can consider the lower and slower approach to still be the best stealthy technique, and with only 6 bytes of data, chances are it wouldn't really be caught. Broadcast ICMP is still the single most common mapping technique in use. It's also very effective. As you can see here, it's scanning the broadcast addresses 0 and 255 once it finds a particular broadcast range that replies. Then you know that there'll be something in that /24 range that you can contact. So here, this is a particular port scan going to target.mynetwork.com, and the dot after it is ports 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. Again, if the port was open you should get a reply back as well. So social media websites. Now, there's a lot of information you can gather from social media. You can get somebody's full name. I'll tell you all the things that you probably already know, all the things you can get, and then I'll put another spin on it and say this is how you could potentially use it to your advantage. You could get the full name. Okay, that's probably going to be quite readily available. Then you get family members, which if you were out talking to somebody and you're trying to social engineer some information out of them, you could go down the route of, oh hey, I was just talking to your brother last night, Jacob, and he told me this and that, and then that kind of automatically builds up a rapport with your target, even though you don't have a clue who they really are, and this is just information you found online. You can find out who their friends are exactly the same way, and maybe even find some friends that can be bought to tell you certain information. Current location as well. Now this is quite good in a corporate environment, because you could say, oh hey, I just spoke to Tom, who's the CEO for a particular company. He told me he was on holiday and he said I could have his password to go in and check his emails for him. And then of course the receptionist on the other end of the phone doesn't want Bob to be angry when he comes home, so she says yes, his password is this, and then you basically have free reign. Home location as well. This has got a lot better recently, but previously when you would check into some places, or even if you were at home, you could see where it was on a map. Personally, that for me is a bit too close to home, shall we say, and I wouldn't want anybody on the internet knowing where I lived. Email addresses, you can send them a specific phishing attack. If you can see that they've just been to a particular theme park, you could craft an email up from that theme park saying, oh, I hope you enjoyed your stay, click here to enter a competition, win a prize, put in your email address and password. What's the chances they're using their password on something else? Probably quite likely. A social plan. possible snooping, interception, or hey, I recognise you from work. Don't you do this or do that? Don't you go to judo on a Tuesday night because I thought I recognised you? Latest purchases. How many times does somebody buy something and the first thing they do is put it on Facebook to say, oh, look at this? Again, it's more kind of things that you can pretend to have in common with your target. Phone numbers. Certain social media websites do allow you to publish your phone number, which is again good for a spear phishing attack. And also likes and dislikes, exactly the same. You can pretend to have the same as them. So concerns. Storage of data. If you upload the information, then who owns it? That doesn't just go for social media, that goes for cloud storage as well. I'd be very careful if you think you still own the rights to something after you've uploaded it to a cloud storage base. Many of them say if you upload it to our systems, we own it and we own the rights to it, so be careful. Identity theft as well. Have you given enough information to pass Data Protection Act with your bank? Can somebody get your date of birth by your birthday alerts on social media? Can they get your mother's maiden name? Can they get your address or your phone number? They are the last things that you really want to give out. Sexual predators, enough said. Stalking. Can someone find where you live or where you're going to be at a certain time from social media? Probably. Unintentional fame. If you do something popular, you risk being famous if it catches on. Employment concerns. If a client sees something on your social media, it may have repercussions for your own job. I know a few people who have called in sick at work and then they posted pictures online of them going on a bender in a pub and they've been fired. So be careful with that. Victimization. It's very easy to communicate with you unless you have your privacy settings set in a different manner. So you have to be careful that you can't be singled out of a group of people. And lastly, surveillance. A broad picture of your life can be pieced together over time with social media. If you look at somebody, a random person on social media, and you know you don't know them, and then you start looking at all the things that they do, all the things that they've posted, after about 10 minutes you get a pretty good idea about who they are. Not good. So harvesting company emails. They're usually for the purposes of spam or phishing, but they're usually done by harvesting bots. So the simplest method involves spammers purchasing or trading lists of email addresses from other spammers. Another common method is the use of special software known as harvesting bots or harvesters, which spider web pages, posting, Usenet mailing lists, archives, internet forms and other online sources to obtain email addresses from public data. Spammers may also use a form of dictionary attack known to harvest email addresses. This is called a dictionary harvest attack, funnily enough, where valid email addresses at specific domains are found by guessing email addresses using common usernames. For example, trying Alan at, example.com, or Alana at example.com, or Alan B at example.com. And they're accepted for delivery by the recipient's email server. Instead of being rejected, they're added to the list of theoretically valid emails for that particular domain. Another method of email address harvesting is to offer a product or service free of charge as long as the user provides a valid email address, and then use the address collected from the users to send spam to. Common products and services offered are jokes of the day, daily Bible quotes, news and stock alerts, free merchandise, etc., etc. Another technique that was used late 2007 by a company called iDate, which used email harvesting to spam victims, friends and contacts. Spam differs from other forms of direct marketing in many ways. One of them being that it costs little to nothing to send a large number of emails. For this reason, there's little pressure upon spammers to limit the number of addresses targeted in a spam run, or to restrict it to persons likely to be interested. One consequence of this fact is that many people receive spam written in languages they can't read. A good deal of spam sent to English-speaking recipients is in Chinese or Korean, for instance. Likewise, a list of addresses sold for use in spam frequently contain malformed addresses, duplicate addresses, and addresses of role accounts such as postmasters and do not reply addresses. Now, spammers may harvest email addresses to form a number of sources. A popular method uses email addresses which their owners have published for their own purposes, such as on forums and things, and that's when Usenet bots specifically can really go to town and pull out email addresses from random websites. They're also called email address spiders to do that. Now, Usenet article message IDs often look enough like email addresses that they're harvested as well. So spammers have also harvested email addresses directly from Google search results without actually spidering the websites found in the search. Spammer viruses may include a function which scans the victim's computer's disk drive and looks for their own contacts as well, and not only their own contacts but any emails that have been sent to them that are loaded onto a local email client like Outlook, etc. It'll look at its from list, look at its to list, and it will collate that information and send it back to the spammer. Likewise, spammers sometimes operate web pages which purport to remove subscribed emails. If you click on a link to say unsubscribe, you put an email address in, it actually does the opposite and it harvests it for you. So next we have an application called Maltego, which is a fantastic tool. As it says here, Maltego is an open source intelligence and forensics application. It'll offer you timeless mining and gathering of other information, as well as the representation of this information. It's in an easy to understand format. So let's take a look at Maltego.